took place in New Zealand in 1840 during the colonization of the British colony via the Treaty of Waitangi. During the colonization era, the number of British migrants increased, which leads to the lack number of lands for the Maori tribe. Maori fought back in the New Zealand wars but ended in defeat. We can see the British has an enormous influence onto New Zealand. Government administration, education and culture were strongly built on the British models, and we can see the British had a powerful dominance during the colonization era in New Zealand. Othering of Sete refers to the colonizer's perspective towards the colonized country in terms of places and their environment. Story, the school picnic took place in the New Zealand's rural area called the Maori settlement. As we can see, Miss Brown plays a very crucial role in this short story. She always criticizing on how the Maori tribe live. For example, she even described the place or the school that the Maori's kid went to is as a dull or a place with no light. We can see this on page 873, where the quotation is, "She went round the front into the sunshine, unlocked the school door and entered. The sunlight was flooding the room through the window and doorway, showing up the roughness of the match-lined walls and low ceiling." Miss Brown also described the Maori school as a school that has no facilities such as desk, blackboards. She even make a blatant comparison that she will not ever accept the incompleteness in the school compared to her city. School before has been a cookhouse for an old sawmill. We also can see this on page 873, which the quotation is, "The place some 30 years ago had been built as a cookhouse for the old sawmill, and no quantity of desks and blackboards of the rules for writing or lists of joining words could make it look like the city school she was used to. It wasn't even painted inside." Miss Brown also described the place where the Maori student live as a mess, dirty and exposed to wilderness. Means that the place where the student live is woodland that replaces harvested and or burned virgin forests. Besides the environment and the places that the Maori tribe live, Miss Brown also disliked the culture that the Maori tribe have. For example, the Haka dance. Haka dance refers to a war cry and a dance that originated from the Maori. Miss Brown obviously disliked and did not approve the dance that the Maori tribe did. For example, she get pissed off when Fatty came at her, showing his belly, twerking his tongue, and at the end, Miss Brown smacked him. Miss Brown felt handicapped when she realized that the Maori tribe are a different kind when they are all together.
Now moving on to othering of characterization. Othering of characterization is a colonizer point of view towards the physical appearances, characterization or traits.
Usually are over-exaggerated from the colonizer, especially in this case, Miss Brown. Miss Brown seems like a proud and arrogant woman because the way she portrayed the physical features of the Maori people. She's somewhat prejudiced and judgmental because of her comments towards all Aurora and Terari compared with George.
As we can see, she's very unsatisfied because she was transferred to become a temporary teacher in the Maori community.
Miss Brown doesn't like being with the local people because she rather be with her own kind. There are few significant othering of characterization that I will highlight on.
The significance are, old Aurora was still very erect, white-haired, his face wrinkled like a dried apple, blue markings on his chins, his eyes looking so very old and brown and tired. The second one is, his arms were bigger than her legs, he had yellow teeth like a horse. And lastly, this will be about George, her husband. He had dark wavy hair, white teeth.
Binary opposition is a key concept in structuralism that states all human cultures can only be understood by looking at how they are interact with one and another in a larger system. It creates boundaries among group of people that leads to discrimination and prejudice. The use of binary opposition in literature is to explore the differences between groups of individuals such as class, gender, and cultural differences. Miss Brown, a reliving teacher at the Seoul Church King Country School, attend school picnic on Saturday organized by the parents. She is the first one to arrive. She hates the food, the old women, the parents, and the children. But in this story, the Maoris represents the stereotypes. They represent hospitality and enjoyment of life. In this story, we are going to compare between the Europeans and the Maori people. So let's look at the first characteristics. The first characteristics is the character. And again, we are going to compare between Miss Brown and the Maori people. Miss Brown in this story portrayed as a white British woman that wears tweed skirt, handbag, watch, and also painted nails, whereby the Maori peoples portrayed as barely showing, wearing hats and disgraceful pants. The second aspect is the language spoken, and again we are going to compare between Miss Brown and the Maori people. Miss Brown, she speaks fluent in English, where the Maori people speaks Pidgin English. These can be seen from page 874. She couldn't bear to touch them. One of them smelled smoky, just like an old roll of bacon, jabbering at her in their excited Pidgin English. The third aspect is the belief in medicine. And again, we're going to compare between Miss Brown and the Maori people. Miss Brown, she believes in modern way, whereby the Maori people, they believe in traditional way. Miss Brown, when Mickey is sick, she advises Mickey's mother to bring Mickey to see a doctor, whereby the Maori people, they attempted to believe more in Chinese herbalists.
Idea that every white man was superior to every black man.
Africa was brought under colonial rule. The lines etched on a map at Berlin were now drawn on the ground. Between them, Britain and France had the lion's share of territory. Among Britain's colonies were key ports in Egypt, the Gold Coast, now Ghana, and Nigeria, and settler colonies in Zimbabwe and South Africa. Excluding Libya, France controlled the rest of Arabic-speaking North Africa, as well as large federations in West and Central Africa. Belgium had taken the vast Congo. Colonies taken by Spain, Italy, Portugal and Germany were relatively few, and only Ethiopia and Liberia remained autonomous.
The Outpost of Progress by Joseph Conrad takes place in Africa during the colonization of the European imperialists in the late 19th century. The European imperialists has already involved themselves in Africa in the 14 and the 1800s, where they have established their trading posts, mainly in the coastal area of the continent, and they have already engaged in commerce with the local Africans. In the mid-17 and the 1800s, the Europeans then involved themselves more with the continent in order to eradicate slave trades there, and they tried to bring Christianity into the continent in order to convert the Africans and to spread the Western culture. This then led to the scramble for Africa, which is where the rival European nations tried to colonize as much African territory as possible and declare exclusive claims to the territory that they have colonized. By the late 1880s, the European powers has already divided themselves the territories in Africa, and without the permission of the African people.
From the short story Outpost of Progress, I have cited 3 quotations with the pictures as well. The first quotation is, here are the images. what interesting here is the use of darkness and sorrow that can bring multiple meanings. As for example, maybe it can refer to the skin color of the native, or maybe, perhaps, it means the culture of the natives, the way they live their life in a very savage way.
This quotation from the text also shows the othering of setting that concerns the African weather. In this quotation, the mist is exaggerated into something that can cause harm to someone. For example, as you can see here, the morning mist, tropical land, the mist that slings and kills, white and deadly, and immaculate and poisonous. All this description symbolizes the mist as something that can cause harm, as I said before. As you can see in the quotation, this imagery that is used to explain the place is positive, yet very unknown greatness that the setting presents to Kayet and Kalia in the story.
For othering through characterization, Kayet and Kalia witnessed a few of the native soldiers arrive near their outpost. Kalia noted that while their arms were good, their legs were very thin and they were unable to make cavalry soldiers, which he then compared with his own legs. This is a prime example of him othering through characterization, because Kalia saw himself as whole and complete compared to the native soldier who was incomplete. The next that I wanted to talk about is about binary opposition. Binary opposition is when the colonized and the colonizer were shown in different portrayals. For example, Gobila, the elderly chief, was shown to view the white man, Kayet and Kalia, as heroic and they were immortal. This was also proven when he thought of the dead artist, the first chief of the station, as not dead, but rather buried himself in the ground, thinking that it was his only way to return to his brothers. However, towards the end of the story, the role of the colonized and the colonizer for binary oppositions was shown to have been reversed, because Makola, who was actually the colonized, was shown to be more of a colonizer than the colonizer themselves, Kayet and Kalia, who eventually degraded themselves into becoming something like the colonized, being uncivilized, and also being infant-like, and become very dirty as well. Makola, on the other hand, was someone who was more mature in his decisions and was far more virtuous, and above all, he was far more civilized.
Te